You know, there's an old adage, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And with the one and done nature of the NFL playoffs, that rings especially true. There have been teams with 14 win, 15 win seasons that failed to smear their dirty fingers on the Lombardi. Over a series of years, these teams could not accomplish the simple task of going undefeated in January, February against the best teams in the league. I mean, TB12 did it like 40 times. Why couldn't they? What's happening, YouTube captives? Welcome to Dan on Sports. Now today we'll be looking at 10 NFL teams we're surprised to remember failed to win a title during their run. Now for my arbitrary criteria, my game, my rules. Similar to my NBA video, this is not a top 10 list. It's 10 teams in roughly chronological order with a little overlap. This is not a singular year, although they all have one standout year that they were super close but then hit the proverbial iceberg and sank. We'll be looking at the body of work for that particular team while that group of coaches and players were together and the series of heartaches and failures they endured. If your favorite team is on here, be ready to cry all over again. Now let's get started. First up, the late 60s and entire 70s Minnesota Vikings. A bit before all of our time, so perhaps I should do this in black and white. Kidding, it ain't that long ago, I guess. When you think of this era of the Vikings, you think of purple people eaters. Not this guy. These guys. And also Fran Tarkenton, who wasn't bad, I heard. So dominant on defense was this team that dominance led to 10 division titles in 11 years, 5 NFC championships, and 4 Super Bowl appearances. Although that's where it ends. They're 0-4, losing Super Bowl 4 to Kansas City, Super Bowl 8 to Miami, Super Bowl 9 to Pittsburgh, who kind of owned that decade, and Super Bowl 11 to Oakland, who also kind of owned that decade. They've never won a Super Bowl. That 0-4 record is matched by another team on this list. More on them later. Up next, the mid-80s Miami Dolphins. Dan Marino, one of those quarterbacks that is hard to imagine never won a Super Bowl. But yep, the legendary Marino, ringless. That man was a phenomenal passer, stuck in an era where the AFC was a new toy that the NFC played around with until they broke their head off. So unfortunately, he got to the Super Bowl and took on Joe Montana, who is undefeated in the big game. Marino was damn good though. How good? He went up to the 85 Bears, widely considered the best defense of all time, and dissected that 46 defense, giving the Bears their only loss that year with a masterful spread offense that would make Brady proud. Marino was expected to make more Super Bowl runs after that initial loss to the Niners, but alas, it never happened. In fact, his final NFL game was a playoff beatdown by the Jaguars, 1,000-7. Ouch. Up next, the late 80s Denver Broncos. Falling victim to the same era of dominance that claimed Marino, John Elway suffered 3 beatdowns in the 80s. His Broncos got roughed up by the Giants in 87, slapped up by the team now known as the Commies in 88, and completely dismantled by the 49ers in 1990. To his credit, Elway did his best but just ran into better teams. The man orchestrated the drive. His credentials are valid. Older folks still talk about the drive to this day. Well, except for Browns fans. Elway would finally break through almost a decade later when Terrell Davis carried the Broncos to the promised land with a broken freaking brain, then again the following year against the Dirty Birds. But before that, there were these Bronco teams that we think back and wonder, how are they ringless? Up next, the early 90s Buffalo Bills. As I said earlier, there was another 0-4 team. This is another AFC team that fell victim to the NFC dominance that stretched across the 80s and 90s, when they won 13 straight Super Bowls. I made a video on that too, check it out. So yeah, K-Gun offense, Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed and Eric Moulds. and of course, Bruce Smith. This was the Super Bowl team if there ever was one, and they proved it by going to 4 straight Super Bowls, a feat that was never done by anyone else before or after. On the flip side, this was a non-Super Bowl team if there ever was one, and they proved it by losing 4 straight Super Bowls, a feat that was never duplicated by anyone before or after. They lost those 4 games to the NFC East, with the closest being the loss to the Giants when Norwood decided to kickstart the 0-4 run. Literally. Then of course, losing to Washington and Dallas twice. That Bills team was special. Just needed at least one win there to validate them. And next, we have the late 90s New York Jets. Now before you drag me guys, hear me out. This was the late 90s Jets, much improved over the embarrassing Rich Kotite years. With Bill Parcells as the head coach and Bill Belichick as the defensive coordinator, the Jets were all set to be the reincarnation of the late 80s, early 90s Giants. With a rejuvenated Vinny Testaverde, a dependable Wayne Corbett, and a fiery Keyshawn Johnson, success came to them early. They made it to the AFC Championship game against the eventual champs, the Denver Broncos, actually had a good lead at halftime before the bottom fell out in the second half, and Denver was able to prevail. The following year, hopes and expectations were high for the Jets, but then Vinny's Achilles snapped like the straps on them cheap masks they told you would save you, and then said, nah, it wouldn't. But yeah, the Jets didn't make the playoffs that year, and all hopes were dashed. Both Bills left, one started a dynasty in the Jets division, and that was that. Up next, we have the late 90s Minnesota Vikings. When you have so many catastrophic and heartbreaking playoff losses under your belt, you'll find yourself on this list more than once. Congrats, Minnesota Viking fans. Skull or something. So the Vikings struck gold in the NFL draft when they drafted some guy named Randy Moss, who was a perfect fit for Brian Billick's offense. When you have an all-time great like Chris Carter and you pair him with Randy Moss, a running attack led by Robert Smith, and a pass rush led by the terrifying John Randall, I mean, look at this man. With all that, you get yourself a 15-1 regular season. With Randall Cunningham coming back with a vengeance, the Vikings obliterated just about everybody. And then came the NFC Championship game against Atlanta. Even with a 14-2 record, the Falcons were still huge underdogs in this game. And late in the game, with a chance to ice the game with a field goal from a kicker who didn't miss all year, guess what happened? Guess. So the Falcons tied the game and won it in OT. The Vikings would get back to the NFC Championship game a few years later under Dante Culpepper, but got railroaded by the Giants, 41-0 or 40-0 or 1,000,000. But this group of Vikings were officially done. And next we have the early to mid 2000s Oakland Raiders. People might forget how good Rich Gannon was for a couple of years, but Dan remembers, and maybe Pepperidge Farms. The Raiders under John Gruden, who was oddly better at emailing back then than he is now, were a perennial playoff team in the early to mid 2000s. Gannon was surgical and efficient, and the team was winning and winning. But they would always come up short at playoff time. There were 2 notable years that really stand out. 2001, the Tuck Rule game, when a stupid rule launched a dynasty, where Brady fumbled the football, but didn't because of a technicality. Then Adam Vinatieri does what he does, bangs a field goal in the snow to force overtime, and bangs another one in OT to win the game. Gannon did lead the Raiders to the Super Bowl in 2005, got dismantled by Tampa Bay when Bill Callahan and company could not be bothered to change anything against the one opponent who knew them better than anyone. Yep, Gruden. The Raiders have been nowhere near a Super Bowl since. And next, the early to mid 2000s Philadelphia Eagles. Proof of my fair and balanced reporting, we have the Philadelphia Eagles were among the best teams in the NFC in the early to mid 2000s. But before that bit of success though, they did famously or infamously boo Donovan McNabb on draft night. They didn't want him. What did he end up doing? only leading them to 4 straight NFC Championship games and 1 Super Bowl. That's all. Under coach Andy Reid and the blitz-happy defense led by the late Jim Johnson, the Eagles squad of those years proved to be damn good. They lost the first 3 NFC Championship games though, and it was clear that their Achilles heel was their receiver core. So they got themselves an upgrade with Terrell Owens, and he helped lead them to a dominant regular season before he got injured. He would manage to play in the Super Bowl against the Patriots and even play pretty well. With the Pats only winning by 3, who knows what would have happened if T.O. was healthy. And next, you knew this was coming. The late 2000 New England Patriots. The Patriots have so many different iterations that it's actually fair to add this particular group here. And with what would have been, how could we not put them here? They were the closest team to shutting Mercury Morris and the insufferable 72 Dolphins up. So with the Spygate scandal all over the media airwaves like a Johnny Depp trial, and the Pats fleecing the Raiders in that Randy Moss trade, everything was in place for the Patriots ass-kicking tour of 2007-2008. Team after team got their asses handed to them. There were a few games that they almost lost, those games being against the Eagles, Ravens, thanks to Rex Ryan, and the key game being the Giants. It's been spoken ad nauseum that one game gave them the confidence to win that Super Bowl. The Pats were 18-0 at that time and needed that one win to achieve immortality. They led with under 2 minutes left, but helmet catch, toss to Plaxico, ball game. What a disaster. Patriots expected to bounce back next year, but Brady tore his ACL on a cheap low hit. Matt Castle still led them to 11 wins. They would have made the playoffs in any other year. Seriously, when was the last time an 11-win team didn't make the playoffs? 4 years later, they got back to the Super Bowl and lost again to the Giants. Really odd that when Brady had the best weapons he ever had, outside of Tampa, he couldn't seal the deal. And finally, the 2010s 49ers. This was the Jim Harbaugh San Fran team, a team balanced and efficient on offense and absolute monsters on defense. With the likes of Aldon Smith, Patrick Willis, and Navarro Bowman, this team was an absolute terror. How did a team like this not win it all? Combination of unfortunate events, that's how. In 2012 against the Giants, in an evenly contested game, the Niners were beat on special teams, giving up 7 in regulation after a fumble by Kyle Williams led to a Manning TD pass to Manningham. They then gave up a field goal in overtime after another fumble by Williams. And then Colin Kaepernick usurped Alex Smith and took the Niners to the Super Bowl against the Ravens in a game that's remembered for that power outage that was probably caused by Beyonce or something. The Niners were down big before the blackout, but came all the way back and almost took the lead. But you know, sometimes holding or pass interference is a myth. That particular group never got back to the big game. And there you have it, folks. 10 teams and their inability to unlock the door when opportunity came knocking. How do you feel about this list? Disagree? Think another team should be in it? Think a team should be taken out? Let me hear about it or read about it in the comment section. Hit me with your best shot. Fire away. Anyways, feel free to add the socials below and give me a shout. So until next time, you're dismissed. Peace.